Okay, Felix. So, once again, hopefully my research hasn't let me down. But also, you haven't mentioned at all, you've been a successful businessman, spending 13 years as deputy chairman of the World Challenge Expeditions Limited.
That's right.
That sounds quite interesting.
Yes, it was. It was a lot of fun too. Um, World Challenge Expeditions Limited was a brand new company when I first got involved with them. When I started off being a customer, I was head of science at Bloxham School in Oxfordshire, and I got a note from the headmaster saying that a piece of paper stuck on the top of this brochure saying, "Any good for Science Society?" I used to have to find speakers for the Science Society, 3 talks a year for the boys and girls at the school, and it was a brochure from World Challenge Expeditions, and they offered to come and speak to the Science Society. What I didn't realise at the time is they weren't coming to tell us about expeditions; they were coming to sell us one, and I got really quite excited by the prospect. And it was the first expedition I went on was 1990, so I was 37 years old when we went to Borneo, and we trekked across through the jungle of Borneo, and also we climbed Mount Kinabalu, which is the highest peak in Southeast Asia, and we took a party of school children. But World Challenge was all about leadership training, and it fitted my view, like a hand fitting a glove. It was, and I became involved with the company, and then I bought some of the company, and I became a member of the board as deputy chairman, and I did quite a lot of going round to schools. I mean, we were in Bloxham was an independent school, but we mostly sold to expeditions to normal state schools, and we did an awful. I mean, we took young people to places they'd never go to, and we got them doing things they would never thought they could do. If I asked you to go to your local supermarket, Sainsbury's, and buy enough food for 18 people for 18 days, you would find it quite difficult. Imagine I asked 2 16-year-old boys to do that, but not Sainsbury's. They had to go to the local market in Manali in northern India, where they didn't recognize the food. None of it was priced, and it all had to be cooked in a pressure cooker because of the height we were at. And they were amazing. We ran out of sugar after about 10 days, and that didn't go down too well with everyone wanting sugar in their tea. But mostly we didn't go hungry. And they were, when you brief someone and well enough, a young person, it is incredible what they are able to do. And that is what the expeditions taught me. And I went on 4 expeditions. I trekked across the Great Himalaya Range, which for someone with a bad hip, with one leg 1.5 inches shorter than the other, for me, it was the greatest achievement in my life, was to trek 200 miles in 14 days across, all of it above 14,000 feet, across the Great Himalaya Range. It was, it seems so far distant now, nearly 30 years ago. But it gave me huge satisfaction, not only for personal achievement, but for what we did for the young people. And it was an exciting time. And as you say, it was 13 years deputy chairman until we sold the company. And I'm still living in part of the proceeds. So it was lucrative in financial terms, but my goodness, it was more lucrative in terms of finding out who I was, even at that age. And goodness knows what it did to a 16, 17, 18-year-old youngster. And we used to tell the parents that we'll take your children away for a month, and when they come back, they'll be different. They will think they're the same, but you will notice that they're different. They're more grown up, they're more self-reliant, they're more able to cope with life. And it was a wonderful experience, and one I'm very proud of.
Okay, so then we're fast forwarding again to when you've left, you've taken over from your dad. You're going to write the Dick Francis franchise. He's 85. You talked about briefing the young people on your expeditions. Did he give you a briefing and sort of say, "Don't ever write this, my lad," or "Don't cross this boundary"? Was there any stipulations that he gave you?
No, I wouldn't have said so. I mean, when I started working for him, I made a stipulation to him that if ever Dad was always very happy to do anything that anyone asked of him. Sometimes without really thinking, sometimes without thinking through the consequences. So we did have a deal when I started working for him that if I said no to something, he wasn't to say yes. And it did occur on one occasion when someone was trying to raise money for a film, and they were using my father as the bait to get people in order to give them the hard sell. And I didn't think that the project was going to succeed, and it didn't. And I knew that if my father got involved with it, he would be the one who would be blamed. But he never said anything to me. I knew my father so well by then. I mean, not only was he my dad, but he was my boss, but he was also my best friend, and we worked very closely together. We thought the same things, and we discussed everything through. We never had a cross word. I mean, he had a few crosswords with me when I was a kid, I suspect. But when I worked for him, we never had a crossword between us. It was the most fruitful of cooperations. And when he died in 2010, it was... I really missed him, but I knew that it was time. He hadn't been well for a long time. And, the last 6 months of his life was not a great time. And in the end, it was a release. Still miss him. Still wish I could talk to him sometimes about the books. But no, I look back on my father's life with great joy.
Now, would you ever consider continuing your writing career, but in a totally different vein, not the Dick Francis franchise? Maybe some. Has that ever crossed your mind?
I have thought about it, but I love writing the sort of books I write with horse racing at their core. They're not about horses, though. The books are about people. Racing is simply the canvas against which I paint the story, the human story. People have said to me, "I don't read your books because I don't like horses." You don't need to know anything about horses. You might learn a bit, and it might help if you knew which end eats and which end doesn't, but you don't need to know anything about horses because they're not about horses. They're about people. And horse racing is a wonderful canvas against which to paint a story. It's highly competitive. It's big business. There's an awful lot of money floating around, an awful lot of it in cash. And people are always trying to tip the odds in their favour by fair means or foul, usually by foul means in my books. But and everyone goes racing. I mean, the royalty go racing. The man in the street goes in the betting shop. I mean, a lot of people that go in betting shops never go to the races, but they enjoy a bet. A bet makes it exciting, they say. And the more exciting, it certainly does. My father always used to say, the trouble is if you bet on a horse in a race, that's the only horse you watch. And he's right there. And he liked to watch the race. But, I mean, it is exciting. Horse racing is hugely exciting. If you go to Cheltenham for the racing festival and there are 70,000 people there and there's a close finish, you just got to listen to it. My father said it was the noise of the crowd at Aintree, all cheering for Devon Loch, which was the reason why the horse collapsed. Because if you see the film, the Pathé News film, because it wasn't televised then, Pathé News film, the horse pricks his ears as he's coming towards the water jump, and he's hit by a wall of noise, and down he goes. And my father was convinced it was the noise of the crowd. There were 250,000 people at Aintree that day, and they were all cheering for the Queen Mother, who was, she hadn't long been widowed, not that long after the Second World War, and she was the most popular woman in the world. Well, certainly in this country.
And are you involved personally at all in horse racing, apart from as a fan?
I have had a horse in a syndicate with Harry Herbert, who helped with this book in the past, but I don't at the moment. Am I involved? I feel very involved. I feel I have an obligation to racing. I mean, there's an awful lot of skullduggery goes on in my books and in my father's books, but we don't do racing down. I mean, we build racing up, and I feel I have an obligation. And fortunately, I'm wherever I go on a race course, people are kind enough to help and to open doors rather than close them. I wrote a book a couple of years ago about Newmarket sales called No Reserve, and I do know that I heard on the grapevine from my brother that the word had gone round at Tattersall's, well, watch out, Felix Francis is here, going to write a book about horse sales. And I think there had been questions asked whether I should be allowed in. Not that I think they might have had trouble saying no, but I didn't do down Tattersall's and racehorse sales, and I did them up. But amongst it, there was a criminal element. That's what I write. I write murder mysteries. Not always murders, but always mysteries. No, I feel I have an obligation to racing, and I feel involved with it. But actually, I suppose I'm just a fan. I've been a member at Cheltenham. I've been racing all over the country, and this country and abroad. Been racing in America and Australia and South Africa and of course on the frozen lake in St. Moritz.
Right, final question goes to your dad. Now, be honest, did he used to dread Grand National Day coming around when they'd show that Devon Loch clip over and over again? It
is very strange that he loved Aintree Racecourse. It was always his favourite place. He never won a Gold Cup. He never won a Champion Hurdle. He never won a Grand National, for that matter, even though he came close a couple of times. Devon Loch was the closest, but he was also second once. And he loved the racecourse. I mean, it was the scene of his greatest disaster, but he still loved the racecourse. When back in 1983, they launched an appeal to save the racecourse from being turned into a housing estate. And Dad was one of the two trustees that went around the country raising money, and they managed to buy the racecourse. He remained a trustee for 23 years of that trust, right through to 2005. He opened the new weighing room at Aintree in 2005 or 2006. And 2 years ago, Aintree installed a life-size statue of my father outside the weighing room, as he was on the day he rode Devon Loch in the 1956 Grand National. So, in a strange way, he loved going back there. I don't think he liked watching the film all that much, but I mean, I've watched the film 1,000 times, more than 1,000 times. I just wish he'd win it once.
Felix Francis, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Simon.